Addison's disease.
But when he was a young man, younger than the students in this class, Rudolf Vrba lived for almost 2 years in Auschwitz.
In medicine.
Vrba was only 18 when he was sent to Auschwitz, caught after trying to flee from the persecution of the Jews in his native Slovakia. He planned to get out from the day he went in. Arbeit macht frei. Work brings freedom, says the cruel lie over the gate. But no prison was ever designed less for freedom than Auschwitz. The fence, electrified, so to touch it meant instant death. The searchlights and towers manned by armed guards, it all seemed excessive for the detention of harmless civilians.
I remember that here in front of the gate was a row of accessmen with dogs, about 12 of them, with Henry holding the dog in one hand and the automatic pistol in the other. And then I come through those two gates, and here was another tower. I saw the machine guns on the tower and the electric wires, and my friend who was with me, who's not alive anymore, said to me at that moment, "Look what is here. Who the hell they think we are?"
Vrba soon learned the answer. They were prisoners in a secret prison where no one was expected to escape or even to come out alive.
I didn't feel threatened until the next day here in Block 1 I saw how they unloaded the dead of the one day.
Is that when they would hold an arm and a leg? And,
that's right, and shove them on the... And I could see in front of my eyes how they threw on a carriage, you know, which was hand-pushed, 200 or 250 dead bodies from the last day. I sort of couldn't understand how from those dead bodies are, because normally it was here it looks almost civilized inside.
But the only civilized thing about Auschwitz was the music, played as the prisoners marched off to work every morning. For Auschwitz was a slave labor camp, and as these drawings done by former prisoners show, the driving force was brutality. If you couldn't work, you were put to death. Vrba himself almost died at the huge IG Farben chemical complex. Here, everything had to be done on the double. Thousands of exhausted prisoners just dropped dead in their tracks. Vrba survived when a typhus outbreak temporarily stopped construction. Eventually, Vrba got a job that allowed him to start recording in his sharp memory the terrifying statistics of Auschwitz. He was assigned to the railway ramp, where the trains discharged their human cargo.
Well, it was quite clear to us that when the transports arrived, that they will choose those who can be used for slave labor. And that's why usually men aged 18 to 40 or women of that age who looked healthy and sort of able for slave work. They never let in old people, they never let in sick people, they never let in children, and they never let in women with small children. No matter how good the woman was looking, 20 years, 25 years, or 30 years, if she was accompanied by a small child, say a 2-year-old child, or a newborn child, or a 5-year-old child, they definitely sent both of them towards the gas chambers.
On the ramp, Vrba kept count of the number of trains arriving in Auschwitz.
They came not in regular intervals, and on the average, I would say, one a day. If I would say that around 30 trains per month. I didn't have a diary here to keep, to write it down, because as you know, anybody who was found with paper and pencil was killed.
Auf der Zug! Auf der Zug! Schnell, schnell! Schnell!
Verba says Auschwitz wasn't only the ultimate in mass murder, it was also robbery on a gigantic scale. Victims' belongings were grabbed right off the ramp, and a squad of slave laborers moved them by truck and cart to a place called Canada. A vacant lot close to Auschwitz is where Canada used to be. Verba recalls how it got its name.
Here, the luggages were broken up, and everything in the luggages was sorted out. The people brought with themselves all their last possessions, which included lemons and sandwiches for their children, their sweaters, their shoes, their money, their wedding rings, their gold, their cash. In other words, here was plenty. Everything was here. And in the Polish peasants' imagination, the country of plenty was Canada.
In Canada, personal possessions were ransacked. Prisoners working here, Rudolf Verba among them, stole the food and clothing they needed to survive the harshness of camp life. But almost everything was sorted, graded, and shipped back to Germany.
So it wasn't just a factory of death. There was a very strong economic part of the whole plan.
I am afraid that you are right, that people think that it was all only sadism, but it wasn't. It was mainly a robber's mind. They were mainly thieves. In Auschwitz alone, you had 2.5 million victims. Imagine that you would murder all population of Toronto and inherit their property. You know that Torontonians all own Toronto in general. There are some poor and some rich. But if you would do away with all of them and inherit all that property, it gives you an idea of what sort of property came from one of the mass murder places, establishments like Auschwitz was.
The main camp at Auschwitz became too small for its purpose, so the SS brought death to nearby Birkenau. Built in open country, Birkenau grew and grew. Sometimes more than 100,000 men, women, and children at a time were locked inside its fences. Communists, criminals, homosexuals, gypsies, Russians, Poles, and above all, Jews. These are some of the wooden barracks called blocks where the prisoners lived and died. And these brick chimneys are all that's left of another 100 blocks in this enormous killing field, the only tombstones thousands of innocent victims will ever have. Rudolf Verba moved to Birkenau in January 1943, and he saw how many prisoners put an end to their misery.
Did you ever hear any gunfire from these towers?
Yes, the main part of the shots came in the morning. In the morning, when the people were driven out from the barracks, many of them were committing suicide by approaching the vase. And the procedure was, of course, long before they reached the vase, they were shot from crossfire from between the towers. So you would hear the shots ringing in the morning, just before the dawn or after the dawn, and peculiar noise which was caused by the bullets hitting the vase, the electrical vase, and this was very peculiar and very characteristic noise in the morning.
Verba became a registrar in a block in the quarantine camp. And with the job came the chance to memorize more of the terrifying statistics.
How many would be in a block like this at night?
It would be difficult to say a definite figure, but it would vary between 800 and 1,500.
So we see on each level there would be
There would be 10 to 15 people on each level.
Tell me what these messages up on the beam, what does that say there?
Well, it says here in German and in Polish that when you are inside the block, you should put down your hat. And the next one says that von Laus is your death. And this is a double message, because it may mean that von Laus may cause your death due to typhus, or it may mean that if we find Laus on you, we will kill you. So you could understand it as you wanted. Both statements were quite true.
Auschwitz-Birkenau was the biggest of all the Nazi death factories, and this was the end of the production line. These are the ruins of Crematorium 2. There were 4 buildings like this in Birkenau. 2,000 people at a time would walk down these steps and be ordered to undress because they had to have a shower. They hung their clothes neatly on the pegs and moved on to the shower room, which was, in fact, a huge gas chamber. From here, Verba saw the gassings take place. It was the mortuary office of Alfred Wetzler, the prisoner with whom Verba later escaped.
So what I saw from the point of view, which is about, I don't know, 100 yards from here, perhaps, was this top of the gas chamber, which had on its ceiling 4 chimneys, as if chimneys, which were made, I think, from tin, and were covered with a tin closure. Now, the procedure was that the SS man who would perform the gassing, and this was usually a member of the SS which belongs to the sanitation group or the health care group. It was a health care problem. They had black signs on their collars. It was usually an NCO, non-commissioned officer. He would come to this gas chamber from outside so that I could clearly see him, and he would hoist himself upon the ceiling. Then he would pour in the granules, the powdered material. He would open the lid of one of those pseudo chimneys, quasi chimneys, pour it in with 2 hands and close the lid. And there were over the ceiling of the gas chambers, of this gas chamber, 4 such openings.
And how many people would be in this chamber?
In this chamber you would have, this chamber was built for 2,000 people.